Okay, so now let's try to go from this stack histogram or stack bar chart into something more radial. Like what if you want to change the axis and the orientations? So first, I forgot to do some things on the previous video. I forgot to put this as a stack histogram. And then the other thing is that since I'm using color for representing information, I should show a legend for that. And there is a way of doing that by importing swatches, or whatever you pronounce that, from a nice notebook that might create called not D2 by D3 color legend. I think it is what it's called. So when you do this, then now you have these nice things, and we have this. Good. So let's start from there, and then let's create a fork, and then you should show me. Interesting. It's really showing me where to fork it, but it's okay. Let's assume that it's going from here, or actually let's come here just to make sure. So this is the original one, and then this is the fork. I will have to delete a lot of those, but anyhow, let's go now and start creating. Let's say that I want to create like a donut chart. Okay, so if I want to do that, then like the first thing is that I will keep this because I still will need the colors. Since I'm going to be doing a donut chart, then I don't really need to do this. I don't need any axis for X or axis for Y. I can also, let's leave those for the moment. I am not going to need the margin. Because I'm not going to use axis. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of this. This is going to be using like the full width. But I actually don't need a scale for X or a scale for Y. So let's get rid of all of those. And I don't need this one. And let's say that this is going to be my color attribute. So I'm actually going to color code by that. And then let's call it color attribute like this, as I was using before. And then we have this. So I'm not going to be using D3 stack. I'm going to be using a different layout for this that it's called pie chart. And then I do need to get my data grouped first. So let's go back to what we had before, group data. And then what we can do is that, remember that for creating a group, we can say D3 groups with my data, and then I'm going to do it with the color attribute. Okay, so I'm getting an error in here because actually here has to be an accessor function. So when I do it like that, then basically these are the groups that I get, and then like how many elements in there. If you want to get the actual numbers, then you can remember that you can always do it like this. Then you just pass an accessor that computes or roll-ups the value that you want. So actually that's the data that we want to visualize. Having done that, then we have this scale, and then what we need is first to compute, like when you think about it like a pie chart or a donut chart, instead of having bars, you will have to draw arcs. And these arcs can be made with paths, and D3 has options for us to do that. So basically what you can do is that you can create a D3 arc. Let's save that as an arc. And then this can have an inner radius and an outer radius. So these can be values. So we could say like that it's something like with halves, but what happens if maybe my height is larger than my width, or the other way around? So I actually need to compute what is the minimum radius. So let's do it like in here. So I'm going to say this is going to be the minimum value of width halves and height halves. Okay, and now that I have a radius, this is going to be the value in here. So let's say this is going to be a radius multiplied by 0.7, and this is going to be the radius multiplied by 0.9. Let's put zeros in there because that looks really ugly like that. And then what this is doing is that it's going to be an arc. If you take a look again at D3 shape, and you see how arcs are created, and sorry for so much scrolling, this is what we want to see. then you can see that once you create an arc, then you can pass these attributes, and then it's going to create a path that you can use for drawing something. So coming back in here, now that I have that, then I can just say, like, for instance, I want an arc, and then you can say that the start angle is going to be 0, and then the end angle can be, let's say, math pi. Okay, so when you do that, then this is going to return an array. Then if you actually show that on an SVG, I wonder if I can do that fast, then it will be something like this one is closing this should be called like this. So you can actually see the value, then I close this thing, I close the path, and then I close the SVG, and I close this thing. And then of course my Spanish keyboard tries to add another one. And then let's say that you want to use stroke in here that is black or something like that. And then of course this thing fails. Let's see what it rendered. So it created the SVG, and then it did the path. Maybe that space, it's giving an issue. Oh, and the other thing could be also the coordinates, like it could be too small. So, but let's at the very least try to do something like this. I think this could be, there we go. So now you can see it started creating that path. So the good thing is that now we have something that can generate paths. So I can use that for that. But then remember before with the stack bar chart, we had a layout generator that was D3 stack. So we have another one for pies that is D3 pi. And then the key in here is that you have to tell D3 pi, I think, it's what is the value accessor that we're going to use. And in this case, it's going to be D sub 1. And actually, yeah, let's do it like that for this one. So after doing that, then the nice thing is that you, if I'm not mistaken, then you can pass this as group data. And then again, this is my laid out data. And as you can see, very conveniently, if I save this as arcs, then I can say, draw me an arc. Instead of doing this arc that I did in here, I can say, please do me the arc, or make me the arc for arcs sub 0, for instance, and then it gives me the arc for that. So basically that's the key on how we are going to draw this. So this is the data that we are going to visualize. So we come in here, and then we say this is going to be my, let's call it arc, and then I'm joining by an arc, and then the data that I'm visualizing are my arcs. Let's call this arc as well, although that seems overly redundant. I don't need this, I don't need this, I don't need that. For the fill, let's see where my angle is getting, or my species is getting. So you can see it's still here in data in the first element. So it will be dot data sub 0, and then I don't need any of this. The only thing I need is to have something that generates the D. And the nice thing about this is that you can just say, this is going to be the arc of whatever D you pass in here. So actually, to make this more clear, could be like an arc, like something like this. And then hopefully that should be enough. I might be having an issue in here, so let's try to see what this thing is rendering. Then we can see we have the elements, we have this G, and then inside that I have the arcs. This seems to be generating it correctly. One of the problems could be like this translation, and also this size that we have in here. I wonder if, what is this, Chrome can tell me where it should be appearing. So let's make that a little bit smaller. Then it's not showing it at all. It has a fill, it has a stroke. Let's put it a stroke just to see if it will draw it. Oh yes, my bad. So this, remember what we did here on the SVG. You need to draw that as paths. So that ends my redundancy. So now if I change these to paths, now we can start seeing the things. So now you see that you need to do some translation in order for this to work. Actually, this is drawing everything around the coordinate 0, 0. So there are many things you could do. Like one of the things you could do is just say, here on the G for drawing that we had, you can just say move left like half the width and height. And then of course I screw up everything. Let's try to see what's happening here. Let's inspect this thing. I now see this SVG. Then it's drawing to the left. And for some reason I'm not, like it seems that it's too much to the left. Am I missing something here? So actually the way that Mike is doing it in his example, it's in here. Yes, but this should be enough. I wonder, like, let me get rid of this for the moment. And that one worked. Still wondering what was the problem with this one. Anyhow, so let's stick with it. So this one is the one that work. So you can change a bunch of parameters on that one. Like if you take a look at the documentation of this, then for your pi, when you look here at the pi, then you have a ton of attributes that you can change. Like for instance, what is the pad angle that you want to include in there? And that pad angle can be nice for, where is my pi? Here. I wonder if I can just pad here, pad angle, and then say 0.1 or something like 1. Then you can see it's like maybe too much. So let's put 0.01. And then now it has a really small one. Now, the other thing that you can see is that if you change, remember that we started in the inner radius with this. If you actually start in the inner radius with 0, then you get a pie chart, okay? So it depends on which one you want to create. So having done that, now we can come and create the labels in there. So we can do that just by doing the same thing. And then we say this is a label. Now we are going to draw texts. So this is going to be a label. For the filling of this, it's not going to be color coded. Instead, let's say this is going to be a gray, dark gray color. And then the key of this is deciding where to move your stuff. So we can do a translation here. And then basically what you pass is that if you take a look there at the documentation, D3 arc has a centroid function that you can pass on any arc. So if I pass that here, remember that we have data binding with the arcs, then this is going to be centered around that. And then you could go and say that your text, it will be D dot or arc if you want. Like actually it will be too many arrow functions in there, so let's put it like this. So if you say like the first one, and then let's see what this thing is drawing as usual for debugging what's happening. So we have this, and then we have the text, but it's not adding anything inside. So I'm joining the text in here. Oh yes, I think this is data. And then you have those elements. So what if you also want to show the number? Then there is no way of, in SVG, an easier way of putting multiple lines. However, there is a trick that you can do, that is that you just append a T-span. And then inside that T-span is where you draw your stuff. The nice thing about this is that you can also change, like for instance, the font size. Let's say this is going to be like 10 points, and then Let's also go and change like the font weight, and let's say this is going to be bold or whatever, and then that's getting better. We can also change some other attributes, like for instance the text anchor, and then say that that one is going to be in the middle. So now it's looking really good. And finally, usually sans serif fonts could look better for these type of things, but you can change that to whatever font family you like, sans serif. So now we have this, but what if we want to show also the name? So if you go and add another append in here, and then you do something like this, then the problem is that this tspan is going to get inside this other one. So another trick that you can use is that you can say, I'm going to use call, and then when you use call is going to return the same text, but it's going to allow you to do things inside of that, and it's very nice for chaining elements. So if you do something like this, then basically it's going to append a tspan in the text and still return the original text, not the tspan. So we can do the same trick once more, and then do it like this, and with that, then we should have the two things. So now you see it's showing it on the left. So the other thing we can do is just saying this is going to be starting in x0. And for this second one in here, we want to change the y position to be 1 em, that it's like the size of an M letter. So with that, it's actually going to go down, like below, I guess. And then we can make that the only one that has, the bold weight, it's the title, and that way it actually looks a little bit better. On top of all of that, you can also make this a little bit bigger. Let's get rid of this, or leave that in there for reference, and then you have it like a radial representation. Now, finally in there, if you want to stop watching this video, it's okay in there, but if you want to learn a little bit more about radial, you can also create other types of representations, like for instance a radar chart. So for that, let me leave this like as this, and then say that I want to create a radar chart that I don't really recommend, but anyhow. And then the key in here is that maybe instead of passing this, what you want to pass is that, let's say that you want to start on 0, and then you want to change the outer radius depending on the data. So for that, what you could do is that you can pass a radius, create a radius scale, and then pass the dot. So this one is going to be called with the arcs. So this will be data sub 1. That is where we have the element. So for that, we can create here another scale that is radius, and it's going to be a scale linear with a domain that is going to be that goes from 0 to d3 max of we can take our arcs, I guess, and that one we can access that by getting d.data sub 1, I think. And then let's see if we got a good domain in there. That looks good. And then the range for this is going to be from 0 to radius. So I don't know if you see what I'm going in there. So basically it's going to be changing the radius depending on what's the size of the element. And just by doing that, then you get a chart like this that is not only changing things with the angle, but also with the radius. This is kind of complicated though, because the area is going to be encoding what you want to represent in there, so it's kind of risky. So if you want to adjust that a little bit, then we can say, you know what, the pie chart, all the arcs should be the same length, and then now all of them are the same length, and then you're actually using now the radial. The radius for changing that element. And if you want to change like the inner value, you just, for instance, add a small gap in here, and then you decide how to create that. If you want to, you can also start creating like some circles. Let's see if I can, if we can do that. Like you could create some circles depending on the radius. Yes, that shouldn't be too difficult to make. So let's say, for instance, that we're going to make SVG select all, and then select all the circles in here, like and call them axis or whatever, and then say that the data is going to be like how many steps do you want. So in this case, I'm going to have like 4 range. So one way of doing this could be a D3 range that goes from radius domain 0 to radius domain 1. That actually, I think we can do that on JavaScript just by saying this. And then the next parameter is going to be like how big of a step you want for that. Like, let's say that we want to change that every 200 pixels. Let's see if this is returning anything interesting, because this idea just came to mind. That seems too big. Yes, that's what we want. So basically, these are going to be the steps at which we draw the angles. So, maybe we can say radius divided by 4. That's good. So basically, with that, this is going to be my data. And then in there, we want to join with a circle. And then add an axis class. So we can say the class axis. And then we just need to change the radius to be the radius of the, that is the artificial value that we have in there. And have an attribute stroke that's going to be, let's say, for instance, I don't know, like AAA, and then another A, so it's a little bit transparent. And as a fill for this, let's say that is not going to have any filling. Hopefully that will show something beautiful. So now we have a mark for each one of the different levels, and then on top of that one, you can also have another one that says what is the text for that. So this is kind of like manually doing the axis. So it will be something like this. This is not going to be the radius. So I think this could work. This should be the fill. And finally, the text for this should be whatever value we have in there. So that is showing me the value in the radius. And then this is a nice feature that I can actually invert in a linear scale and then get the numbers in there. So that way you can actually have a better value in there. And if you want to make this look better, we can also say that the font size for this is going to be only 8 points, and then start customizing that so it looks a little bit better. So you can make it dotted and things like that. So that helps you knowing like how many elements are in there. Although there might be a problem with this one because this was supposed to be 152. And this one is telling me it's like 114, so maybe it's the other way around in there. So, but that's kind of like the idea. So yes. So in any case, I'm going to perfect that. That is just to show that the key of doing this type of things in D3 is just choosing what layout algorithm you're doing, and since you have so much freedom, you can change how to draw your stuff.